Hello everyone, good morning. So before starting the introduction, we must know about the navigation guards because people easily get confused between the navigation guard and the resolvers. So what is a navigation guard? So basically navigation guards are used for authentication purpose. Means if your application has different roles with different permissions, so how can the application determine which that the current user is authenticated to hit the route or not? So these things are handled by navigation guards. It returns true or false. If it returns true, then the navigation is hit, the route is hit, and if it returns false, then the route is not hit. So there are different guards like can activate and can deactivate, can load. So as Nikit explained, that can activate determines whether a route is to be activated or not. So before activating or initializing the route, beforehand only it authenticates whether a current user is authenticated to go to that route or not. So it becomes very easy for the developer to determine for providing the authentication. Okay. So why route resolvers? Means as you see the name route resolver, it also means, as the name suggests, resolving the routes. It also provides the same thing. People, a layman would think both are same, but there's a difference. The guards do not allow you to bring a certain amount of data beforehand only. Means, for example, we can take the contact application. There are two components. First one has a list and the second one has a contact detail. As you select in the list, the details will be shown on the next component. So what happens is that when you click on the list, the ID is sent to the API, to the backend, and you get the data, and during this the UI is already rendered. So what happens is, we can see in this example, if we click on the contact, any one of the contact, the API call is going, then the data comes. So the UI is already rendered. So what we naturally do is that we use a loading icon or something, or loader. We show that if we are making an API call and the data is loaded. So but it requires extra coding. Everyone knows that it requires extra coding. We require in HTML tags, we require conditions that if the data is loaded, then show this section, else show the loader. Extra coding is required, and also the look and feel of the application. If we don't use extra coding, look and feel of the application decreases. As you can see that UI is loaded, the user waits for what user doesn't know that you are making an API call. So he will be confused that no data is there. So he can again switch back. So these all things may happen. So for this purpose, route resolvers are actually used. So before starting, we must know about Angular structure, folder structure. So the E2E file folder is for end-to-end testing. That's all I know about it. And the node module folder contains all the packages that are installed for your applications and you require and you use in your application. The SRC folder contains all the source code files and folders. Package.json contains all the dependencies, like what you have defined in the node modules when you run npm install in your application. This package.json file downloads all the dependencies and install it in your application. So let's see the SRC structure. It contains app, assets, environments, and the index.html, main.ts, everything. So the first file that is main.ts. If we see that, it calls the app module. So first main.ts is it, which indirectly calls app module. So in the app structure, we have folders, components, services. The basic thing when we make a new project, what we get is these four files: app component.css, HTML, spec.ts, ts component file, and the module file. The CSS file is, as you know, it is used CSS for designing and all. HTML file is for HTML view. Spec file is for testing. Component file is a place where we apply the business logic or the conditions, the front end part. And then comes the module file. In the module file, we define all the dependencies that this particular module, this is the app module. So we define here all the modules or the dependencies that are required by the app, every component of the app. We can define it here. So currently we are declaring the three components that we are using: app component, first component, second component, and we are importing the modules. We declare the components, we import the module, we provide the services, and bootstrap. So now we will see then we have to make a basic routing file for our app, the base route. So we make a app routing module.ts file. In this we define the route constant. This defines that on this particular route, this particular component is to be loaded. Okay, is it clear? Yes. So now let's check out the component folder. So this component folder doesn't come beforehand only. I have made this component folder for proper structuring. Okay, so we have two components, first and second. The most obvious name I could get. So the first component, in the first component it loads the list of the contact that are available, and the second component displays the detail of that particular contact which is clicked. We have a service folder and we have a service contact detail service. It has two functions, get contacts, which get all the contacts, and get contact, which has the argument ID. It gets the respective contact whose ID we pass through it. And in the first component we use this get contact function, and here you can see get contact. Here we are used this .contact service get contacts. So here we will get all the complete contact list, and we will use it in its HTML only the name. And in the second component we will use the get contact, and we will use the ID to get the contact. So as you can see in the services file, I have used this set timeout function. So this function I have used to make a feel of that API call is being done. It's nothing that we have to do this. It is not mandatory. If you do API call, generally it takes some time. So just to make a feel of it, I have done this. So I guess the problem what I was explaining, it is understood by all of you, that the UI is rendered before and the data loads afterwards. So how does a route resolver solves this, and how can we define a resolver? There are two basic ways to define resolver. First is via function and second is via class. So the easier one is the function, and we will start with it. For defining the route as a function, we have to define it as in the provider section we make an object. In the object the provide key indicates the resolver name, and the use value returns contains the value which the resolver returns. So here it will return this particular value to the route, to the second component when it is hit. Like if we comment it out, and so in the app module we have to define this in the provider section, because as you can see this the resolver is just like a service. So it is also defined with the decorator injectable. So it is just like a service, and services will be provided. So we will define it inside the providers, and we will define it here like this. And what it determines is that there is a resolver which is named as contact and returns a value, which returns an object actually, which has name, contact, email and address. So this I think it would be clear that this function, that resolver as function, is to be used only when the data is static. That is, you want to load a static data, not a dynamic one. So the data is already fixed and you can just load it. And in the app routing module, we need to define a resolve object which contains the key and the resolver name. This resolver name we have defined here in the module part, contact. So this resolver name is the same thing. And then in the second component we come, then here we will use this detail route snapshot. What is route? Can anyone explain this activated route? Anyone? Sanket? No one? Activated route. Yeah, and what all details it can have, means what it can contain. Yeah. So the first thing that if we want to assess the route, we have different functions like route.params, route.snapshot. If you use route.params, it only gives you access of the parameters that is sent in the URL part. But if you use the route.snapshot, you can have the control of whole route, whatever the data it is sending and whatever the params it is sending. So in this case, the resolver data is sent through the data part of the route. So we need to use this function route.snapshot.data, and which data we want to resolve? Contact data. So now if we run our application, see, the UI part and the data part is loading at the same time, but it is not that good because the data part is static. If we click on any of the contact list, it will load the same data. So we cannot make the API calls. Means we cannot inject dependencies. So next question arises, what is dependency injection? Anyone? No one? Vani? Dependency injection?
Same thing. I understood.
When you want to inject other APIs, it means when we want to inject a data from any other service or API from backend calls, then you use dependency injections, like you inject services. Okay. So dependency injection requires constructors basically. So can anyone tell I've quoted this, that dependency injection requires constructors. So why we cannot inject dependency in that resolver as function? Anyone? It is basic.
Didn't get your question.
Means I quoted that dependency injection requires class constructor. Okay. So why we cannot use dependency injection inside the resolver as function? This one. Because it does not have a constructor. Simple. It does not have a constructor, so we cannot inject the dependency. Okay. So from there only the requirement came to make a resolver as class. In that case, we can, if we are having a class, we can easily make its constructor. It's not a big deal. So what we do is we make a different separate file. So we make a separate file, detailed contact resolver. So as I told that it is just like a service, so we will use a decorator injectable. So in this service, in this resolver, we will call that the service, we have injected this service, contact detail service that we were using beforehand. And we will use it get contact and route.params ID will send to that particular function, and we will fetch its ID, and this resolver will return that particular value. And in the app routing, it becomes a little easy to define this. We don't have to make this large code to define a function and all. We just have to provide it as a class in the app module file. Like in the detail contact resolver, we can easily see that it is a class named detail contact resolver, and the module we define it as a detail contact resolver is being used by this module. So, and we have to change the routing file as well. So in the routing file beforehand, we were using that the contact name which we have used that with the resolve key. So now we will use this class name only. This is same that we use the object resolve object, and it contains contact which indicates that which class we want to resolve. Okay. So in this case, can anyone tell that what is going to happen? Means that in the case of function, the UI and the data were loaded as we clicked on the list. Okay. So what will happen in this case? Can anyone tell? What if I click Narendra Modi? You want to see? It will take 2 seconds of time for loading the route. Means it is making the API call and everything, and then it loads the UI and the data at the same time. So I guess this was the better option to use than to use a extra coding for loader and all. But there is a case when we require a large amount of data from backend. At that time it is not good to use this because it will take a lot of time to load that particular route. That time I would prefer using the loader instead. extra coding I will do it. So any questions regarding this? Anyone?
I have some questions on the Angular architecture, not this. When we use injectable, does it always return the same object or objects?
No, means if you will use this injectable means that service, if you define it, provide it in the app, so it makes one object for all the components.
So it's single.
Yeah, but if you want different objects, so you can define it like I have used components. You can make modules also, different modules and their subcomponents. So if you want one object for this module, other object for this module, so you can provide it here and here. So it will have different object for both the module.
More or less, with React, we built BuilderX using the same architecture.
Okay.
Now we realize that it's so similar.
Anyone? Nikit? No questions?
So you said resolve, you don't want to use resolve.
No, in case of,
I'm a user.
yeah.
I went to the web page and I clicked it. And the web page takes time to go to that page. And I will be clicking on that button. What is happening?
So that doesn't matter now, means you keep on clicking. It will load after making the API call only. You keep on clicking. It will make only one API call and it will just make the API call and it will load.
Now his question is more on the user experience side. So we can actually show a loader
Yeah.
at the top or somewhere. So you can actually use the function, the resolver function, and inject a loader in the body or something.
Anyone else? Suraj?
So if you click multiple times, does the API call get called multiple times, or do you have something to resolve that?
For that you can use, means there is another resolver for that. Angular provides everything beforehand only. So there is a separate thing, HTTP something resolver something. I don't exactly remember the name. It is I guess HTTP resolver only. So it removes the duplicate API calls that you make by multiple clicks. Because somewhere I read that making a button disabled is not a good practice. So instead we can use that HTTP resolver. So it will make only one API. It will remove the duplicate API calls. That's it. Okay then. Thank you.